Can I have your attention, please? Let me thank you for coming and sharing in our press conference this morning. My name is Bishop Reginald Jackson, Bishop of the 6th District of the AME Church, which is the state of Georgia. In early July 1863, the Confederate and Union armies gathered and engaged in battle in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. In this heated battle, the Union forces defeated the Confederate Army and stopped General Robert E. Lee's northern march. The Battle at Gettysburg is considered by many historians to be the turning point of the Civil War. We gather here this morning from different parts of this country. And as it was in 1863, we in this country today find ourselves really engaged in another Civil War. We find ourselves with 48 states having introduced hundreds of bills whose intent is to suppress and make it more difficult for blacks and people of color to vote. And for much of the last few months, our focus and our attention has been on these bills introduced in these 48 states.
Good.
But today, I want to caution us that our primary focus must no longer be on state legislation or in state capitals. But our focus now must be the nation's capital and federal legislation. It must be because many of these states are controlled by governors and legislators who have bought into and support the big lie that the election was stolen.
That's right.
And they want to argue that the reason they have introduced and seek to pass these bills is to increase people's confidence in the integrity of our election. But as demonic and racist as this legislation is, that is no longer the most important concern. The most important concern now is the threat that this legislation poses to our democracy. The threat that this legislation poses to free and fair elections. Not since the Civil War of 1863 has our democracy been at so great a risk. The one thing all of this legislation has in common is that now, under this state legislation, partisan legislatures can overrule or reject the will of millions of people. For example, in Georgia or in Texas, a legislature or a judge can reject the results of an election. This is no longer government of, by, or for the people. This is anarchy and autocracy. My brothers and my sisters, we've come today to the nation's capital because we have got work to do. We come today to say that we are going to work, we're going to pressure, we're going to do what we have to do to get the Congress. And I want to say I'm delighted to see our Congressman from Georgia, Hank Johnson, come in. We've got to get this Congress to pass the For the People Act and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. So we've come to Washington because as Gettysburg was the turning point in the Civil War, that's right, our coming to Washington is going to be the turning point in this battle. Brothers and sisters, let me say a word first of all about For the People Act. It is imperative that this bill pass because it will negate the consequences of legislation passed in Georgia, trying to be passed in Texas, and all of these other states which deliberately and intentionally seek to change rules and suppress our vote. We have got to pass the For the People Act. That's it. And then second, my brothers and sisters, we've got to pass the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. In fact, let me simply say, the John R. Lewis Act is long overdue. That's right. I suspect this matter will end up before the United States Supreme Court. Yes, sir. And we're going to find out what kind of Supreme Court we have. That's right. But the fact of the matter is, it would give the Supreme Court a chance to clean up the mess that it created. Yeah. When the Supreme Court gutted much of the Voting Rights Act and Shelby versus Holder, it really gave all of these states the opportunity to manipulate and change all of these laws that we're trying to battle against now. And so we've got to pass this federal legislation. And so it's going to require us to do several things. Mr. Winkler from the Council of Churches will talk about For the People Act. My friend was going to come and talk about the filibuster, and Barbara is just an authority on these subjects. But the fact of the matter is, we're going to have to deal with the issue of the filibuster. And I just want us to understand two things. One, we will be meeting with several senators and several senators' officers. And nothing changes without pressure. That's right. And we need to make it very clear, and there are two senators in particular I want to address this comment to, and that is regard to the filibuster. The filibuster is a Senate rule. Let me emphasize, it's a Senate rule. Nowhere in the Constitution do you find the word filibuster. But voting rights is in the United States Constitution. The question is, what's more important, the Senate rule or the United States Constitution? When our elected officials take their oath, they vow to uphold not Senate rules, but they vow to uphold the Constitution of the United States. So trying to suppress or make it harder for black and brown people to vote is a violation of the Constitution of the United States. Second, we want to make it clear that this democracy is important to us. And I want to emphasize it's particularly important for people who look like us. Our ancestors, people who look like us, they toiled and labored and built this country. And I looked the other day when they had on about what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it offended me that our black soldiers would go fight overseas to ensure freedom for other people and then come back home and not have freedom themselves. So this is the fight we have to engage in. The reason we've invited you is because our work is not here, but our work is back home. This afternoon we're going to have training sessions where you will be briefed on what the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act is all about. Then you've got to go home. You've got to organize. In different states, you've got to be in contact with your senators and pressure them and lobby them to support this federal legislation. You've got to do that when you get home. This afternoon, a number of us will be meeting at the White House. And my brothers and sisters, one of the things I want to make it clear, and that is I am so disturbed and frustrated listening, it's hard for me to even call his name, the minority leader from Kentucky. He's just against anything that benefits us. So he's already against the For the People Act. He's already against the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. He's against ending the filibuster. He's against anything that's going to bring about progress. My brothers and sisters, there's a time to be nice, and then there's a time to stand strong. We've got to stand strong. I want to thank my colleagues, Lee May, Timothy McDonald, Jamal Bryan, and other clergy here. My brothers and sisters, the black church historically has been the conscience of the nation. That's right. In this environment, we once again have got to be the conscience of the nation. So we ask you to join with us in this fight, and let's make this the turning point in this struggle. It's my privilege now to call on my colleague, Reverend Timothy McDonald, if he will come and give us some remarks.
Thank you so much, Bishop Jackson. I will try my best not to be too long. Been in this fight for civil rights a long time now. About 5 decades all over Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida. Brandon Lohema said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. What is happening to our right to vote in this nation that promotes democracy is unconscionable. Black, white, Christian, Jewish died, gave their lives for the right for people of all races, of all religious persuasion, of all colors, of all denominations, to have the right to vote. Who would have dreamed that even today, the President of the United States, representing a supposedly democratic society, will be having a conversation with Putin, representing a communist society? How can you promote democracy abroad when the people cannot even experience democracy at home? It is no accident that this voter suppression legislation has been introduced in some 47, now 48 states. It is not an accident, it is by design. And it's by design because we had the highest turnout in the history of voting in these United States. In November, we surpassed any other election in terms of turnout than we ever have, including the Obama years. And so we are clear of what the Heritage Foundation is up to. We are clear on what the radical religious right is up to. We are clear. The Southern Baptists are meeting right now in Nashville. They are the ones who are primarily responsible for trying to turn back the clock. And they clothe themselves in Christianity and religiosity and act as if it is the will of God. Voter suppression is not a will of God. The voter suppression is not something that the God that I serve would ever support. Critical race theory. Since when has racism become a theory? Racism is a fact, indisputable fact. And what the voter suppression is all about is racism. And we're going to send the message loud and clear. That's why I'm with the bishop. That's why I'm here with Barbara Skinner. That's why I'm here with Denise Zimmerman. I ain't going back. Been there, done that. We ain't going back there no more. We're not going back to those days of suppressing black people and how many bubbles in a bar of soap. How many jelly beans in a jar. We're not going back. Because people of moral persuasion, they're coming together across America. Oh, I can see it. Black and white and brown, they're coming together all across America. That's how we won this past November. And that's what they're afraid of. All that they're doing now is waiting to November next year. They're working to take back, they say, control of the House. They are working to take back control of the Senate. And they must have read Malcolm X, who said by any means necessary. And their necessary mean is suppressing our votes. But we got news for them as I get ready to take my seat. We got news for them. They're going to become the best organizers of the progressive movement in these United States. Because the more they try to suppress our vote, the more we're going to organize and strategize and pray together and work together. And I predict we're going to have one of the largest, if not the largest turnout come November 22 that we've ever had in these United States of America. Can I get a witness? We're going to show them what God can do. We're going to show them what God shows us, how God's people take control. And we're going to make sure that every vote gets counted, that every American feels good about the process, and these United States will become the United States of America because we are American and we ain't going back.
Church service or if this is a press conference, I would just say amen. Real quick, my name is Lee. I'm the pastor of Transforming Faith Church in Atlanta, Georgia, or Decatur for those who are here from Georgia. And I just real briefly wanted to bring up my congressman.
Yes, sir.
My congressman. And for those of you all who don't know my history, I actually served in office, in political office, for nearly 12 years. And it's because of this man right here. And he and I were talking the other day, and I remember sitting in his law office and talking to him about possibly running for his seat because he resigned to run for Congress. And he's done just an awesome job representing us in the Atlanta metropolitan area, but particularly in DeKalb County. So he wanted to come by and bring just a few remarks for us. He took away from his busy schedule to be with us today. So I want to bring up none other than our Congressman, Henry Hank Johnson.
And thank you all so much. Lee May has been
And despite the clear language of the 15th Amendment, the vote was denied to the black man. And of course, women didn't have the right to vote until 1921 by way of constitutional amendment, the 21st, I believe. But even that did not bring relief to the black women, because they were black. And so it took all the way to passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Almost 100 years later, after ratification of the 15th Amendment, a statute, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, gave us the right to vote, and we exercised it, and based on that, I'm here today. Lee May was able to serve, and others, including John Lewis. So this right to vote is sacred to some, but it's a privilege to others. The ones that it is a privilege to don't think that we should have the privilege of voting. But we know how sacred, and you don't use that term sacred to apply to anything. Sacred is something that is deeply special. That is almost divine. You know, equality is a divine principle.
That's right.
And a lot of people don't believe that that right to vote is sacred. By your presence today, being here, you understand how sacred that right is. It's to us as a people. And so those who think it's a privilege have been trying to take it back from us, doing everything they can. But we're not going to let it happen.
That's right.
And it's only, well, first of all, I'm proud to see how many people have traveled all the way to Washington, D.C. under your leadership, Bishop.
That's right. Yeah.
But you look at the fact that there's 330 million people in America. I mean, what can a relatively small group of people accomplish? Whole lot. In fact, one person, Bishop Jackson,
That's it.
can change the world.
That's it.
And so I believe that with the multitudes of you who are here today, you're going to make a difference here in Washington, D.C. And so I want to thank you for being here. I want to let you know that my colleagues are, it's so many things going on Capitol Hill, so many committee meetings and all kinds of things going on. I've got to get back myself, but I came to represent my colleagues, to speak to you, to let you know that we are here in solidarity with you. Yes. And there is nothing on this earth that can stand in the way of prayer. So there's no need to be less than positive about the way forward. Let's be proud, confident, and let's get it done, y'all. Thank y'all so much.
Again, thank you, Congressman Johnson, for taking the time to be with us and for the leadership you are providing. And I want to be so glad that I didn't have to follow Reverend McDonald. Now, Jamal Bryant, Lee May, myself, and Reverend McDonald all agreed that there would be no preaching. And Reverend McDonald forgot that today is Wednesday. Let the church say amen. And now I want to present Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, who is the co-convener of the National African American Clergy Network. And I just want to say I cannot think of anybody who has had more impact and made greater difference as it relates to the faith community trying to impact for the better our nation and in particular people of color than Barbara Williams Skinner. I want to also thank her because she's the one who played a role in arranging our meeting at the White House this afternoon and for a lot of this going on today. So I just want to publicly thank her and invite her to come and address us.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am so honored to be here this morning with this esteemed delegation, especially the Georgia pastors who turned Georgia from red to blue. Let's give them a hand. We wouldn't even be here this morning had they not turned Georgia blue. We wouldn't have a prayer to talk to the Congress had these brothers not turned it out. And so I'm just honored, Bishop, thank you so much for allowing me as co-convener of the National African American Clergy Network of denomination and independent church leaders representing over 15 million members. I am so grateful to join us. Georgia is one of our key states. But we've been with them for a minute. We were there in November, we were back in January, and we can all celebrate today. So this vote is going to pass because the same energy we used in January and November, we're going to use to get this vote passed. The same God is at work. Nothing has changed. The psalmist David says in Psalms 11, when the foundations of law and order have collapsed, what can the righteous do? For the righteous can look to the God, look to the hills from which comes our help. And that's what we're doing in this legislative journey today. We're not going on our own. We are a part of that same cloud of witnesses that have gone before us. A part of the protest movement that got us here after George Floyd's death, when the Congress turned and looked like America for the first time, but it angered a lot of people. That's nothing new. Hank Johnson just told us this is part of our history. We can't ever sleep. Coretta Scott King said struggle is a never-ending process. You earn and win freedom in every generation. This is a time to focus on freedom as never before. The issue right now is that there's one big antiquated procedure that's standing in the way of this vote, and Bishop has already told us about it. It's called the filibuster. The filibuster has been used for over 100 years to block civil rights legislation. It was President Obama at John Lewis's funeral who called on the legislators who showed up to end this madness, end this nonsense. It's not in the Constitution and it should be abolished today. We're saying to the White House, we need you to lift it up. It can't be amended in the kind of evil it has been used for. Right now, what we're dealing with, brothers and sisters, is even if we turn back all of those 400 bills, there'll be others coming. You can only turn back states' rights with a national legislation. That's what the 65 voting rights did. That's what this John Lewis Voting Rights Act will be, and for the People Act. But we can't count on just a few. All of you have something to do. We gotta go back. All you have to do is go online to congress.gov and figure out who your congressperson is. You know what? We couldn't even get meetings with members of Congress unless one of you from the state helped us. So you have power. And you need to stop sitting on it. They're scared we're going to show up in power. We're scared to go use it. It's this day to use our power. We have to choose this day who we will serve. And as for me and our house, we are going to serve the God who's going to get us the John Lewis and the For the People Act. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you so much. And now is my my joy to be able to present some years ago, from 2012 to 2016, I was the Ecumenical and Social Action Officer for the AME Church, and I had the opportunity to work with Jim Winkler, the National Council of Churches, and he is a progressive, thoughtful, persuasive voice that needs to be heard. And I want to thank him for coming to join with us today as we engage in this battle. Mr. Winkler.
Well, Bishop, thank you. You're very kind, but you're not very fair making me finish or follow Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner. Voting rights are under attack. We're here today to protect and strengthen our right to vote. And I want you to know the National Council of Churches supports both the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the For the People Act. This is, thank you. That's 38 member denominations with 100,000 local churches. That's black churches and white churches. That's Orthodox churches and mainline churches. That's Anglican churches and peace churches. Every single zip code around this country includes churches in the National Council of Churches. Friends, just 5 months ago, a violent mob organized by the outgoing President of the United States of America invaded the Capitol building in an attempt not only to overturn our elections, but to murder the Vice President of the United States and members of Congress. Subsequent to that rejection of the principle that we choose our leaders through elections, laws have been passed in a number of states to restrict access to voting. We are here today because we are serious about the right to vote. The book of Deuteronomy says, choose for each of your tribes individuals who are wise, discerning, and reputable to be your leaders. That's what we want to do. We believe that. We try to practice it for our churches, and we believe it is the right way for our nation to proceed. Choosing wise, discerning, and reputable leaders for our nation is the responsibility of all our people, not just some. The For the People Act increases election security by making it easier to register to vote and requires states to include same-day voter registration, online voter registration, and makes registration automatic for eligible voters. Why wouldn't we do that? Why would we remove people from the voter rolls if they fail or forget to vote? Why would we make it difficult to vote? Whose interest would that serve? Well, we know the answer to that question. Throughout the entire history of our nation, property-owning white men have tried to keep the right to vote for themselves. We've had a long struggle, a long walk to freedom, to open the vote first to all white men, then to black men, and then to women. And still, there are forces attempting to roll back these hard-won gains. The For the People Act will restore the right to vote to people with prior criminal convictions. We here today who represent churches are believers in forgiveness and redemption. If you've served your sentence, you should be able to vote. We believe you should play a full and active role in society, including voting. The For the People Act sets national standards for voting by mail without unnecessary requirements or restrictions. Voting by mail is easy, convenient, and popular. Even some of those who have attempted to demonize voting by mail vote that way themselves. There's a guy down in Florida who does that. The most recent version of the Texas bill would ban drive-through voting, further limiting absentee voting in a state that already has strict eligibility rules. When it's been pointed out that this would make it harder for people with disabilities to vote, they shrug their shoulders. Voters who, the For the People Act bans racist and partisan gerrymandering, and requires states to use independent redistricting commissions. This is long overdue. The For the People Act creates a small donor matching system to finance campaigns. This is fair and right. We're tired of rich people and corporations buying elections and influence and corrupting our decision-making process. Corrupting it. The For the People Act requires secretly funded organizations to tell us who their donors are, and it strengthens oversight of campaign finance and political spending. If you want to give money to a political campaign, then own up to it. Tell us, we're one nation, one community, and we cannot have people trying to secretly buy elections. No more of that. No more. The For the People Act strengthens enforcement of ethics rules and broadens conflict of interest laws so as to slow down the revolving door between government officials and lobbyists. We're sick and tired of people using the expertise they gain working on behalf of all of us to then go and help the very people and corporations who are trying to circumvent the rules and regulations that protect the common good. And the For the People Act will require presidential candidates to disclose their tax returns publicly. And it will hold the Supreme Court accountable to a judicial code of ethics. My friends, we need honest and forthright and intelligent and wise rulers, and we insist they be transparent with us regarding their financial and business dealings so that we can judge whether they have serious conflicts of interest. The For the People Act should be passed by the Congress. We're here today to insist that be done. Thank you.
Now let me present the distinguished erudite pastor of the New Birth Church, and I happen to be his bishop, Dr. Jamal Bryant. Give him a hand.
Thank you, members of the press, and to those of you who have assembled. Let me introduce myself as Pastor Jamal Harrison Bryant, New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Stonecrest, Georgia. I think that there ought to be just a level of clarity about what is taking place on this day. To have Congressman Hank Johnson share with us Bishop Reginald Jackson, presiding prelate of 6th Episcopal District, National Council of Churches and the African American Clergy Network. To have a bus to drive 12 hours. To have pastor fly in from around the country. This looks like the backdrop of what it should be.
Yes, sir.
Because if you walked in, you would presume on this Wednesday morning that all of us are here to celebrate what happened in Senate yesterday. On yesterday, the U.S. Senate unanimously passed legislation to make Juneteenth a national holiday. In 1863, when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, it took 2 years for the word to get to Galveston, Texas. On June the 19th, they got their word and were able to celebrate. So imagine how it is that we stand in this place, having a Psalm 137 moment. That as we sat by the Babylon, we wept. They wanted us to sing, but we hung our harps. It is what Charles Dickens would call the best of times and the worst of times. Because there is a recessive gene in us that wants to celebrate what has happened yesterday in the U.S. Senate. But we are mindful of the blood that drips from the Senate's hands. That unanimously they could in fact pass legislation for Juneteenth and expected us to blow balloons to celebrate. But how can we celebrate? How can we celebrate when that same Senate cannot come together and lift a living wage for the working poor that are amongst us? Cornel West said, America is the only nation in the world that has the working poor. You can work 40 hours a week and still not have enough to sustain your family. This same U.S. Senate that refuses to have checks and balances for itself, to act as if January 6th was a figment of our imagination, when it is that former Olympiads and off-duty police officers and one former congressman was outside giving a great chastisement when it is that we cried Black Lives Matter. They echoed Blue Lives Matter, but somehow had laryngitis on January 6th. This same Senate was able to fluently articulate filibuster, but cannot in fact find themselves to articulate the first stanza of the Constitution, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and have the inalienable right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So isn't it amazing that we're here in the Mayflower Hotel, where Malcolm X said we didn't come on the Mayflower, but the Mayflower landed on us. Langston Hughes from a one-bedroom apartment in Harlem, New York, that said, I too sing America. They asked me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I just laugh and eat well and grow strong. But tomorrow they'll see how beautiful I am, because I too am America. And so we are not asking America to do us a favor. We're asking, in the words of Dr. King, to be who they are on paper, and to make sure that this is truly the manifest destiny. We're coming because voting rights is what it is that we should have, but that is not enough. Because we understand that Dr. King, talking to Harry Belafonte, said in a private conversation, I am afraid I've integrated the Negro into a burning house. Because what is the point of civil rights if we don't have civil rights? That's right. They can sit at the lunch counter but don't have money for a hamburger. And so economic development has got to be a part of what it is that we ask the U.S. Senate for. We can't come from Athens or Rome and Atlanta, Georgia, and talk about voting rights and not articulate reparations. Because reparations has got to be a part of the agenda of what it is that we discuss. We come in moral authority and moral high ground of realizing that we are prepared to go to jail if that means giving out water. That we're prepared to get citations if that means giving out chairs to our seniors. We are prepared to make the moral, ethical high ground of realizing that souls to the polls is not limited to Sunday, because even on Wednesday we still have a soul. Lest we forget, it was a part of the inner fabric of white supremacy that believed to assuage their own evangelical conscience that we didn't have a soul, that we were only 3/5 of a human being. So we are demanding the people, here it is, that are elected servants, not elected celebrities. Elected servants to not operate in dictatorship, but to understand that this is for the people and by the people. Pastor May is coming behind me to talk about our economic prowess of $1 trillion in spending power. He brings these remarks in the backdrop of President Biden just 1 hour ago, shaking the hand of President Putin, who just 24 hours before the meeting announced that the U.S. currency will not be recognized. Just 1 day after Cuba recognizes that the dollar will no longer be acknowledged by their banking system, while 23 other states with intentionality have a diabolical economic agenda to tank our dollars. And yet we've got to beg Home Depot and Coca-Cola to understand what it is that we bring to the table. So this is in fact part and parcel of why it is that Bishop Jackson has galvanized us here by planes, buses, and automobiles, to really land on the steps of the seat of power, to know that we are not here as tourists, but we are here as activists. We are not looking for photo shoots. We are looking to shoot down anything that will block our generation from getting to the polls. And so this is what real patriotism looks like. And so those who are obstructionists of justice, be mindful that you are standing on sacred soil. You are standing on the soil of Benjamin Banneker, who designed Washington, D.C. in the first place. You're standing on the soil of Frederick Douglass, who was able to articulate the thoughts, the passion, and the frustration of African Americans. You're standing on the soil of Sojourner Truth, who right underneath this hotel was able to give a passage for slaves to have an opportunity to write, to bear arms, to own property, and to own businesses. You're standing on the soil of those who in fact stood up and realized, even while I cannot be recognized, I will not be ignored. And so, press, we are glad that you are here, and we're asking you to start a rumor that runaway slaves have come from Georgia, and we ain't gonna let nobody turn us around.
There's another one, forgot today is Wednesday. How many of y'all glad to be in the number of the runaway slaves? Ain't nobody gonna turn us around. Now it's my joy to present the Reverend Lee May, the pastor of Transforming Faith Church, also a former elected official in DeKalb County, leader of a clergy organization, and was able to call together hundreds of preachers from that county to join in this effort, and who has just been an outstanding partner. Again, I am blessed to have some outstanding partners in this effort. Let me present my friend, my brother, Reverend Lee May. Thank you, sir. Ecclesiastes 4:12 says, though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. Yeah, right. The work that we have to do, y'all, we can't do it ourselves. That's right. Yesterday in the same space, we had a worship experience, because we know that what God has called for us to do, we can't do it in and of ourselves. It's going to take God giving us the power, the influence, the grace, the favor. And it's going to take us coming together as one. You know, the stories of old, the stories of great triumphs, the stories of the civil rights movement and the accomplishment happened because they decided to come together. Yes, sir. Collectively. Yeah. People of different backgrounds, people of different faiths, not just black people. People of different experiences. And what we're going to need here, you all, as we come here and from Georgia, we need partners, we need allies, we need people to stand up with us that don't talk like us, that don't walk like us, that don't have the same faith experience as us, that doesn't have the same agenda as we do. We have labor here today represented. Yes. We have other faiths here today. We have people more than just black people here today. You know, really, Bishop Jackson called us together about this issue in Georgia with Senate Bill 202. But he called us together because we were seeking support from corporate America. Well, you know, corporate America, they have big influence. Why do they have big influence? Because they got big money. The dollar bill, y'all. Wu-Tang Clan, our classic says, cash rules everything. You see Jamal's laughing. Rules around, everything around me, cream, get the money. Dollar bill, y'all. That's what corporate America understands, and they have a lot of it. And they use that influence to influence legislation and policies that can determine their outcome, their personal financial outcome. They have lobbyists, internal, external lobbyists. They have government relations department within their corporations, and they use that to influence laws that will affect their bottom line. And so when Bishop Jackson called us together, he called us together because we wanted to seek their support to help us stop this suppressive legislation in Georgia. Now, unfortunately, we heard nothing but crickets from them. We heard silence. We heard nothing. Wouldn't even respond to our calls. And Bishop called us together to say, we're going to boycott. And we had two corporate entities that we were focusing on at that moment. I won't say their name. Yes, I will. We were focusing initially on Coca-Cola and Delta. Lo and behold, the day before the press conference, Bishop gets a call. Then we talked. They wanted to talk and say something then. And because we are people of faith, we are people of grace. So we said we will talk. And you can just imagine when people sit down and talk how really good things can happen. And Coca-Cola and Delta called together a meeting of other corporate executives. And we had a really rich conversation. They understood where we were coming from. We laid down 4 points that we wanted to see from them. They agreed, and we were able to move forward. However, one particular entity decided not to even respond to Coca-Cola or Delta or even us. That was Home Depot. And so we launched the boycott of Home Depot. We like to say we didn't choose Home Depot. Home Depot chose themselves. All we wanted to do was to talk. We wanted help. If you want to get the benefit of our dollars, of our financial support, when we stand up and we need you in our time of need, we expect you to move forward as well. Now, unfortunately, they chose not to today respond. And so we call ourselves operating with selective buying. I don't go to Home Depot today, and I guess I won't until they finally call. But what we have done now is pivoted. We've pivoted. The boycott is still live. We have pivoted to this federal legislation because we believe the cure of what we are seeing around the country in Georgia and Florida and debating in Texas and other states around the country can be cured through federal legislation. And you've heard about the bills. I don't need to talk about it again, but just to state the names: For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. They both protect and expand opportunities to vote. That's why we support it, and that's why we are here in Washington, D.C. But our need for allies still remain. That's right. Our needs for support of those who will stand up with us and say we want to see this federal legislation passed. And so today, as we're here, we're going to meet with our senators and Senate offices and the White House and all of that. We still need support. We need allies. We need you all to stand up. We know labor is with us, but we don't take that for granted. We need your support ongoing. We know the faith community is here, but we need continuous support from the faith community. When we leave this place, when we leave Washington, D.C., we will begin organizing faith leaders around the country in targeted states, because we are focusing on Republican senators and Democrats as well. From those states where we need the vote, we're going to organize those faith leaders in those communities as well. But we are coming back to the corporate community. We need you to stand up with us. And I'm talking to corporate America right now. Your wonderful statements were great. Those statements, those press advisories, those press releases that you put up, those letters that you signed were absolutely phenomenal. And I guess it's better than silence. But we're also going to ask you to step forward and put your money where your mouth is. Put your actions where your mouth is. Put your internal, your external lobbyists, your government relations operations, put them in place to help us get these two pieces of legislation passed. We need you. And yes, our boycott it's unilateral. We're focusing on one corporation right now, but you know it can expand.
Yes, sir. It's just talk.
Come on.
And our focus on this boycott was not the goal. The goal is the passage of the federal legislation, but we seek corporate support in this. And let's talk so we can show you how we need your support. Let's talk, let's have this dialogue so that we can get the successful passage of both of these. So this is what we need you to do. When you leave this place, you may work for some corporations that have big dollars, big government relation entities within themselves. Go back home, go back and just say, hey, what's your stance on these federal legislation? Because I want to know that you, my employer, are aligned with my needs personally. Because the vote is sacred. We want to continue to do this thing in alliance with one another in unity. That threefold cord is not easily broken. You know, a few disciples of Jesus turned the world upside down. Just a few went from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria to the ends of the earth. What can we do? And we all come together in God's name. Amen?
Amen.
Thank you so much, Reverend Man. You know, Reverend McDonald just showed me some statistics. In last year's election, we spent over $14 billion. More than any other election in American history. And out of that $14 billion, 80% of it came from corporate America. 11 billion out of $14 billion came from corporate America. Which means that average citizens like you and I only spent 20% of that $14 billion. And yet corporate America wants our money, but they don't want to stand with us in this effort. Now, brothers and sisters, let me present the Reverend Delisha Davis. I've known for a number of years. Happy to see her again. She's going to come and speak on behalf of People for the American Way. Reverend Davis.
Good afternoon, my brothers and my sisters. In the name of the Lord, my name is Delisha Davis. I serve as the pastor of Callaway United Methodist Church in Arlington, Virginia. And also I'm a board member for People for the American Way. Our president is Ben Jealous, who leads us wonderfully. And our leader of the African American Religious Affairs is Reverend Leslie Watson Wilson, who you will hear more from this afternoon. It's wonderful to be here with Bishop Jackson, Reverend Tim McDonald, Reverend Jamal Bryant, and all other members of the clergy and laity as well, as we send a strong message. It's time for this country to live up to the promise of liberty and justice for all. It's time to fight back against the new Jim Crow that's aimed at silencing the voices and stealing the votes of Black and brown Americans. Congress must pass For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. You must pass the For the People Act to undo these terrible voter suppression laws that we are seeing state after state. It also must pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to prevent a lot of these laws from being passed in the future. Because we know this is not simply about where we are right now, But what is happening today is going to affect our children and grandchildren, generations that are to come. These two bills are like two sides of a coin. With both of them in place, we'll have strong protection against the attacks on voting rights that are happening across our country. Attacks that are aimed at voters of color who made their voices known in the elections of 2020 and delivered a charge to the White House and to Congress.
All right.
We are calling on Congress to pass this legislation.
Right.
But we are also going straight to the top with this message today. When we say straight to the top, many of you are thinking about 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But I think we all know that there's a higher power than 16 feet. We are also sending a message to President Joe Biden and Vice President Harris that we need them to put the power of their words and persuasion into protecting voting rights.
Right.
We need them to do everything in their power to get the For the People and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed. We have another message for Congress. If the Senate filibuster stands in the way, it must go. I am so proud of the role that our African American churches, clergy and laity together are playing in this fight. As we all know, this fight began many, many years ago, and it is the African American church that has historically led in the changes in this nation. Our black churches have been a moral force and a source of leadership throughout our country's civil rights struggles, throughout our efforts to form a more perfect union. And the same is true today. My friends, this right here is our civil rights issue in America. We will not let Jim Crow win. Can I submit to you today that I don't believe that this is simply about whether or not black and brown people can go in and vote. It's even more than that. Newly elected Senator Ralph Warnock says that a vote is a silent prayer. Can I tell you and submit to you today that the reason you and I are in this room right now is because we know that prayer changes things. Governors, Republicans, far right, those who are working against us right now are not afraid of you going into a voting booth. They are afraid because they know that when you go with that vote and that prayer is going to change something. I don't know about you, but when I look back over my life, I know that prayer changed something. When I read over my Bible in the sacred text, I see that prayer was able to heal the sick. Prayer was able to raise the dead. Prayer was able to save over 5,000 souls. And so we are here today. We're not destitute as long as we have a prayer. So I encourage you to do what Paul told the church at Thessalonica. Pray without ceasing. Vote without ceasing. Stand up and fight without ceasing. We're going to keep on praying the prayer that my mentor, the late Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowry prayed at the benediction for President Barack Obama. We're going to keep on praying until black won't have to get back. Until the brown man can stick around. Until the red man can get ahead. Until the yellow man can become mellow. And until white will embrace what is right. Thank
to preach today. And the bad thing is we took up the offering last night. No, let me thank everybody who participated in this press conference, and everyone spoke so relevant to this issue. Before we leave, if there are any members of the press who have any questions, we'll take it now. If there's any member of the press with any question, I'm sure Reverend McDonald, Reverend Hay, Reverend Bryant, Winkler, any of them behind me will be more than delighted to answer your questions, anybody but me. See that she got y'all off. Anybody want to give y'all get to this system, we'll take it. Now, brothers and sisters, let me give you some direction because we do